The Bible. It's 66 books of history, stories, letters, and poetry that fit together to form God's one big story. The epic adventure of how He created us and loves us so much that He made a way to rescue us. As we travel through the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, we discover people who met God and found their lives changed forever. And now for an amazing story, inspired by the book of Isaiah, chapter 9, verses 6 and 7.
God crafted a breathtaking, beautiful world to be the perfect home for His most amazing creation, people. But since the first moment of history, those people that God so deeply loved turned away from Him. The world was broken. People chose to go their own way rather than care for others or the God who cared for them. But God had an idea. He chose a man named Abram.
Abram, I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great. All nations on earth will be blessed because of you.
Though Abram, later called Abraham, and his children and his grandchildren had made many mistakes, God still honored His promise. He made Abram's family into a great nation, the Israelites. Then, centuries later, after the Israelites had been enslaved, God called a man named Moses to lead them all to freedom and to the land that God had promised Abraham so many years before. God gave His people rules to keep them safe and set them apart from the other nations around them that worshipped false gods.
Do not put any other gods in place of me.
Now, God provided priests and judges to guide the people in this new land, but all they wanted to do was be like the nations around them.
They have a king with a crown and a shiny sword.
That is like totally amazing. We should have a king too.
Though it saddened God's heart, God instructed the priest Samuel to choose a king for Israel. Now, the first king, Saul, did not listen to God, but the second king, David, was called a man after God's own heart. God made a promise to David through the prophet Nathan.
Your royal house and your kingdom will last forever in my sight. Your throne will last forever.
See, God was telling His people that someone from David's family would be the true king who would rescue and rule over God's people forever.
Lord and King, how great you are. There isn't anyone like you.
There were many kings who followed David. Some of them listened to God. Most of them did not.
Check out these groovy golden calves I made. Pretty sure they rescued you from slavery, even though I just now made them.
So bow down and worship.
Once again, God's people turned away from Him. They worshiped false gods and fought against each other. At last, God allowed enemies to capture His people and take them to live in foreign lands. God's people had failed to follow Him, but even though they were scattered, He remained faithful. God whispered the details of His plan to rescue them once and for all. He sent prophets like Isaiah to share His word.
A child will be born to us. A son will be given to us. He will rule over us. He will be called Wonderful Advisor and Mighty God. He will rule on David's throne and over his kingdom. His rule will be based on what is fair and right. It will last forever. The Lord's great love will make sure that happens.
Through the prophet Micah, God promised,
Bethlehem, you might not be an important town in the nation of Judah, but out of you will come a ruler over Israel. His family line goes back to the early years of your nation.
God gave Zechariah a picture of what this ruler would be like.
City of Zion, be full of joy. See, your king comes to you. He always does what is right. He has won the victory. He is humble and riding on a donkey.
God even revealed that this king would die for the sins of all.
He was arrested and sentenced to death. He was cut off from this life. He was punished for the sins of my people.
But God also promised that not even death could stop this rescuer.
You will not leave me in the place of the dead. You always show me the path of life. You will fill me with joy when I'm with you.
So God had given His people all the puzzle pieces. He had promised a Messiah would rescue them. The only catch was nobody knew when this Messiah was going to arrive. Now, eventually, some of God's people were allowed to return to their home, but they still lived under foreign rule, first under the Persians, then the Greeks, and at last, the Romans.
All hail Caesar!
Then, for hundreds of years, God seemed to be silent. God's people just went about their daily lives under Roman rule. Many of them probably gave up hope, including the religious leaders.
A Messiah? Yes, of course. He'll show up sometime. Just pay your temple tax, okay? I need to buy new golden tassels for my robe.
But still others lived in hopeful expectation that God would still send someone any day.
God's Spirit has told me I will see the Messiah before I die.
Well, the stage was set. Everything was in place for God to bring joy to the world. But no one could have imagined how unusual the arrival of God's rescuer would be. In the little town of Bethlehem, lying still beneath silent stars.